Life has a way of revealing people's true colors when money enters the picture. I'm Emma, and this is the story of how my stepsister Sarah's greed destroyed our family, or so she thought. Growing up, I always tried to welcome Sarah and her mother Linda into our lives after my father remarried. When they first moved in, I was 12 and Sarah was 14. I still miss my own mother terribly. She had passed away from cancer 2 years earlier. But I wanted to make things work. My father seemed happy with Linda, and I wanted that happiness to last. Sarah, however, never reciprocated my efforts at sisterhood. While she maintained a perfect facade in front of our parents, she made it clear in private that she saw me as competition. "This is my house now," she'd whisper when no one else was around. "And your dad, he's going to love me more than you." I tried telling my father about Sarah's behavior, but Linda always defended her daughter. "Girls will be girls," she'd say with a dismissive wave. "Sarah's just adjusting. Give her time." My father, not wanting to rock the boat in his new marriage, would simply encourage me to try harder with my stepsister. As years passed, I focused on my studies and building my own life. I graduated from business school and started working at a financial consulting firm, making my father proud. Sarah, meanwhile, bounced between jobs and relationships, always finding ways to extract money from our parents for her latest venture or crisis. My father's health began declining 3 years ago. What started as occasional fatigue progressed into something more serious. The doctors diagnosed him with a rare form of leukemia, and suddenly, our world turned upside down. I immediately shifted to working remotely so I could help care for him. During those long days at the hospital, I noticed Sarah's sudden increased interest in our father's affairs. She started spending more time in his hospital room, always shooing me away with claims of private conversations. Linda supported this, saying Sarah was finally bonding with her stepfather. What I didn't know then was that Sarah was carefully orchestrating my downfall. One evening, after a particularly long day at the hospital, I returned home to find my laptop missing from my room. I searched everywhere, but it had vanished. When I mentioned this to Sarah, she just shrugged, saying she hadn't seen it. 2 days later, my father called me into his hospital room. His face was ashen, and Linda stood by his bed, arms crossed and glaring at me. Sarah sat beside him, holding his hand, tears streaming down her face. "Emma," my father said, his voice weak but filled with disappointment, "Sarah showed me the evidence." "How could you?" "Evidence? What evidence?" I asked, genuinely confused. Sarah pulled out my missing laptop, opened it, and turned it toward me. On the screen were bank statements showing large transfers from my father's accounts to an offshore account in my name. My heart stopped. These were clearly fabricated, but they looked convincingly real. "I found this when I borrowed her laptop to check my email," Sarah said, her voice trembling with fake emotion. "I couldn't believe my sister would do this to you, Dad. I had to tell you." "That's not possible," I protested, my voice rising with panic. "Those statements are fake. Sarah stole my laptop. She must have fabricated this." Linda stepped forward, her face twisted with anger. "How dare you accuse my daughter when she's exposed your theft? We raised you better than this." "Dad, please," I begged, turning to my father. "You know me. I would never steal from you." "Sarah's lying." But my father's face had hardened. Years of Sarah's subtle manipulation had done their work, and now, in his weakened state, he was all too ready to believe the worst of me. "I already called my lawyer," he said quietly. "I'm changing my will. I can't trust you with my estate, Emma. Not after this." The room spun around me. Everything I'd worked for, every sacrifice I'd made, was crumbling because of Sarah's elaborate lie. I tried to explain, to defend myself, but Linda and Sarah had created such a convincing narrative that my protests only seemed to confirm my guilt in their eyes. "Get out," Linda snapped, pointing to the door. "You're no longer welcome here, you ungrateful thief." I looked at my father one last time, hoping to see some doubt, some willingness to hear my side. But he turned his face away, and in that moment, I knew I'd lost everything. As I walked out of the hospital room, Sarah followed me into the hallway. Once we were alone, our tears vanished, replaced by a triumphant smirk. "You should see your face," she whispered. "Did you really think Dad would choose you over me? I've been planning this for months. Every detail, every document. Perfect, wasn't it? And now, everything that should have been yours will be mine." I stood there, my whole body shaking with anger and disbelief. "Why?" I managed to ask. I never did anything to hurt you. Sarah's eyes hardened. Because you existed. Because for years I had to watch you play the perfect daughter while I was always second best. Well, not anymore. I win, little sister. I win. I left the hospital that day with nothing but my purse and my car keys. Linda had already texted me, warning that if I returned to the house, she'd call the police. I checked into a hotel, my mind racing as I tried to process how quickly my life had fallen apart. That night, my father's lawyer called. In a cold, professional voice, he informed me that my father had signed a new will, leaving his entire estate, including the family home, his business shares, and all his investments, totaling roughly $4.8 million, to Sarah. I was completely disinherited. I spent hours staring at the hotel ceiling, replaying every moment, every interaction with Sarah over the years. All her little comments, her subtle manipulations had been leading to this. She'd played the long game, and I'd never seen it coming. But as I lay there, something my father had once told me came flooding back. In business and in life, Emma, he'd said, always keep proof of your integrity. Sometimes the truth takes time to surface, but it always does. A small smile crossed my face as I remembered something else. Something Sarah didn't know about. My father's old safety deposit box at the bank. He'd given me access to it years ago, and inside was evidence that would turn Sarah's perfect plan on its head. But I had to be patient. Let Sarah think she'd won. Let her believe her victory was complete. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge is the one you don't see coming until it's too late. Tomorrow, I would start gathering my resources and planning my next move. Sarah thought she'd taken everything from me, but she'd forgotten one crucial detail. I was my father's daughter, and he taught me well. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. 3 months passed after my father's death. I spent that time living in a small apartment, carefully avoiding any contact with Sarah or Linda, while they basked in their apparent victory. Through mutual friends, I heard about their extravagant spending. Sarah had already started renovating the family home, replacing everything that held any memory of me or my mother. But today was the day everything would change. I sat in the bank manager's office, watching through the glass partition as Sarah and Linda strutted in, dressed in expensive new clothes bought with my father's money. They were here to access his safety deposit box, the one they'd only recently discovered existed after finding the key in his study. What they didn't know was that I'd already been here an hour earlier, speaking with Mr. Thompson, the bank manager who'd known my father for 20 years. Mrs. Walker, Miss Thompson, Mr. Thompson greeted them formally. Please follow me to the vault. I stayed out of sight as they disappeared down the hallway. The security camera feed on Mr. Thompson's desk showed them entering the vault area. I watched as he helped them locate the correct box and left them in the private viewing room. Standard procedure for safety deposit box access. Sarah's hands were practically shaking with excitement as she inserted the key. I could almost hear her thoughts. More hidden assets. Extra money? But when she opened the box, her triumphant smile froze. Inside was a single USB drive and a letter in my father's handwriting. The envelope read, "To be opened only in the presence of Emma Collins." Linda snatched the letter, her face reddening. "What is this? Where's the rest?" Sarah was already reaching to tear open the envelope when Mr. Thompson's voice cut through their confusion. "I must ask you to stop immediately. That letter clearly states it requires Miss Collins's presence." "This is ridiculous," Sarah snapped. "I'm the sole heir. Everything of our fathers belongs to me now." That was my cue. I stepped into the viewing room, enjoying the way both their faces paled at the sight of me. "Hello, Sarah." "Linda. Surprised to see me?" Linda recovered first, her shock turning to fury. "How dare you come here? This is a private meeting." "Actually," Mr. Thompson interjected, "Miss Collins has every right to be here. She's still a registered holder of this safety deposit box." I walked over and picked up the envelope. "Shall we see what Dad wanted to share with all of us?" Sarah tried to grab the letter from my hands, but Mr. Thompson stepped between us. "Miss Thompson, please remember you're on camera. Any aggressive action will be reported to the authorities." With trembling hands, I opened the envelope and began to read aloud. "My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, then my worst fears have come true. I know about Sarah's plan to frame you for theft. I discovered her scheme weeks ago when I overheard her talking on the phone about forged bank statements. At first, I couldn't believe it. I wanted to confront her immediately, but then I realized this was my chance to know the truth about both my daughters. I decided to play along to see how far Sarah would go. The USB drive in this box contains security camera footage from my home office showing Sarah breaking in late at night, accessing my computer, and creating the fraudulent documents. It also has recordings of her phone conversations with a hacker she hired to create the fake bank statements. Emma, my brave girl, I'm so sorry for doubting you, even briefly. By the time you read this, I'll have already signed a new will, the real one, hidden with my lawyer, Mr. Davidson. The will Sarah thinks she benefits from is a fake, part of my own plan to expose her true nature. My entire estate, all $4.8 million, belongs to you, as it always should have. The will Sarah has is worthless. Love, Dad. The color drained from Sarah's face as I read. Linda gripped the table for support, her knuckles white. I looked up from the letter, meeting Sarah's terrified eyes. You really should have been more careful about where you made your phone calls, Sarah. Did you really think Dad's office wasn't monitored? You're lying, Linda sputtered. This is a trick. I pulled out my phone and played a video of security footage showing Sarah in our father's office late at night, hunched over his computer. Her voice came through clearly. Yes, I need the bank statements to look perfect. Emma has to lose everything. Sarah lunged for my phone, but Mr. Thompson was faster, stepping between us again. I've already sent copies of everything to the police, I said calmly. They're very interested in wire fraud and inheritance fraud cases, you know. You can't prove anything, Sarah hissed, but her voice shook with uncertainty. Actually, Mr. Thompson added, the bank has already received notification from Mr. Davidson's office about the validity of the real will. We've frozen all accounts pending investigation. Linda grabbed Sarah's arm. We need to leave. Now. Oh, you'll be leaving all right, I said, but not for long. The police want to speak with both of you. They're waiting in the bank lobby. As if on cue, 2 police officers appeared at the viewing room door. The next few minutes were a blur of activity, Sarah and Linda being read their rights, their protests echoing through the bank's marble halls. I stayed behind in the viewing room, holding my father's letter. A tear rolled down my cheek as I read his words again. He had known. He had protected me, even at the end. Mr. Thompson touched my shoulder gently. Your father was a wise man, Miss Collins. He knew exactly how to expose the truth. I nodded, wiping my eyes. Yes, he did. And now it's time to set everything right. The weeks following Sarah and Linda's arrest were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and revelations. As the investigation deepened, more of Sarah's deceptions came to light. She hadn't just forged bank statements, she'd been systematically stealing from our father's accounts for months, using the money to set up her own secret nest egg. I sat in the courtroom, watching as Sarah's carefully crafted world crumbled around her. The evidence was overwhelming. The security footage, recorded phone calls, bank records showing her theft, and even testimony from the hacker she'd hired, who'd struck a plea deal to testify against her. Linda didn't fare much better. The investigation revealed she'd been fully aware of Sarah's plan, even helping to coordinate some of the theft. Her perfectly maintained facade of the caring stepmother shattered as prosecutors exposed her role in the scheme. During the trial, Sarah finally broke down on the stand. It wasn't fair, she screamed, mascara running down her face. She always had everything. Dad's love, his trust, his pride. Everything I wanted. I deserved that money. The judge was unmoved. Miss Thompson, your actions show a calculated effort to destroy your stepsister's life for personal gain. This court sentences you to 8 years in prison for fraud, theft, and conspiracy. Linda received 5 years for her role as an accomplice. As they were led away in handcuffs, Sarah turned to me one last time. I hate you, she spat. I've always hated you. I simply watched them go, feeling not triumph but a deep sadness for the family we could have been. With the criminal case concluded, I moved back into my childhood home. The first few days were difficult. Memories of my father were everywhere, along with signs of Sarah and Linda's brief occupation. They'd started redecorating, trying to erase every trace of the past, but hadn't gotten far before their arrest. One evening, as I sorted through papers in my father's study, I found an old photo album. Inside were pictures from my childhood, my mother, my father, and me in happier times. There was also a sealed envelope tucked between the pages, addressed to me in my father's handwriting. With trembling hands, I opened it. My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, then everything has played out as I feared it might. I want you to know that my apparent betrayal in the hospital was the hardest thing I've ever done. Pretending to believe Sarah's lies, watching you walk away thinking I'd abandoned you, it tore me apart. But I knew I had to let her think she'd won. It was the only way to expose the full extent of her deception. The hardest part was knowing I wouldn't live to see justice done. I need you to know that you were always my greatest joy. You have your mother's strength and kindness, and I couldn't be prouder of the woman you've become. The way you handled this crisis, with dignity and patience, waiting for the truth to emerge rather than seeking immediate revenge, proves you're exactly the person I raised you to be. The money, the house, the business, yes, they're all yours now. But they're not what matters most. What matters is that you stood strong in the face of betrayal, held onto your integrity, and let the truth speak for itself. I know the road ahead won't be easy. Betrayal leaves deep scars, and healing takes time. But remember this, true family isn't always about blood. It's about love, trust, and choosing to stand by each other through good times and bad. I hope you'll find it in your heart to build a new family, one based on love and trust rather than obligation. You deserve that happiness, Emma. Don't let Sarah's actions poison your capacity to trust and love others. Take care of yourself, my brave girl. Know that your mother and I are watching over you, proud of the woman you've become. All I love, Dad. Tears flowed freely as I read his words. Even at the end, facing death and betrayal, my father had thought of my future happiness. He'd known that money wasn't what I really needed. I needed to know that he believed in me, trusted me, loved me. In the months that followed, I worked to rebuild my life. The family business thrived under my leadership, and I established a scholarship foundation in my father's name, helping students who'd lost parents to cancer. It felt right to create something positive from all the pain we'd endured. I also sought therapy to process the trauma of Sarah's betrayal. Slowly, I learned to trust again, to open my heart to new friendships and relationships. My father was right, family isn't just about blood. I built a new family of chosen people who supported and loved me for who I was. Sarah and Linda made several attempts to contact me from prison, sending letters filled with apologies and pleas for forgiveness. I didn't respond. Some betrayals run too deep for simple forgiveness, and some relationships are better left in the past. Instead, I focused on honoring my father's legacy through my actions. The money he left me became a tool for positive change rather than a source of conflict. In the end, that felt like the greatest victory, turning what Sarah had wanted to steal into something that helped others. Today, 5 years later, I still live in our family home, surrounded by memories of the parents who loved me and the lessons they taught me. The pain of betrayal has faded, replaced by gratitude for the wisdom my father showed in his final days. Sarah and Linda's greed cost them everything, their freedom, their reputation, their future. But their betrayal taught me something valuable. True wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the integrity with which we live our lives. As I sit in my father's old study, watching the sunset through his favorite window, I feel at peace. His last gift to me wasn't the money or the house. It was the lesson that patience, integrity, and truth will always prevail over deception and greed. Sometimes I think about Sarah, wondering if prison has changed her, but then I remember my father's words about choosing my own family, and I know I've chosen the right path. My life is full of love, purpose, and genuine relationships, things that Sarah, with all her schemes and manipulation, never understood were worth more than any inheritance.